everyone. Thank you. And thank you, everyone here at PINC, for letting me be here. When you guys see this image, this video, what do you think? Maybe there's a dolphin. Maybe we'll see a shark. Maybe you want a vacation. But when I see that, when I stand at any shore, I think about what's under the water. And not just what's under the water, but what's under the sand that's under the water. And I think about the thousands of years of human history that's now covered by the world's oceans. And I think about all the people that have come before and the stories of their lives. I shot this last night at Casey Key, and had someone been standing right where I was 10,000 years ago, their view would have been totally different. They wouldn't have seen water. It would have been uplands and trees and grass as far as they could see. Sea levels have risen that much. So what were their lives like, those people that have come before us? That's kind of what I do. I'm an underwater archaeologist with the state of Florida, and I'm accompanied by two of my colleagues here in the second row, Melissa and Nick. And it's our job to tell the story of the people that have come before us. And we do that by the clues, the evidence, the material culture, the stuff that people have made and left behind that we go out and try to locate. We are underwater explorers, if you will. It's not like Indiana Jones. There are no whips. And it's not entirely like terrestrial archaeology either. We trade our shovels and pickup trucks for scuba tanks, boats, and wetsuits. It is tiresome work. It can be dangerous work. It's logistically complex and often kind of costly. But because of all those things, not in spite of all those things, I think it is one of the most valuable fields and really represents the future of archaeology. And what we do is carefully sift back, peel back the layers of time, again, looking for those clues of the past to try to tell the story of those people that are no longer here. And we've had the pleasure and the responsibility of working a site for the past couple years that is literally right here in Sarasota's backyard. This is a site that, when I was in school, I was told could never exist. This is a site that is quite literally changing what we thought we knew about what could exist in our world's oceans. And I'm very happy to talk to you today about what we found out so far. So here we are in the Sarasota Opera House. If you went 25 miles as the crow flies south-southeast to Manasota Key, head offshore, you would find what we've called the Manasota Key Offshore archaeological site. It's in about 21 feet of water. And one thing that I'd really want to highlight is how much Florida has changed. 20,000 years ago, the state was over twice as wide as it currently is. Think about that, twice as wide, double the landmass of the state. So for anyone who's done any deep sea fishing off the Gulf Coast, 20,000 years ago, you wouldn't have needed a boat. All that would have been dry land. You'd have to get out past the Florida middle grounds, hundreds of miles in the Gulf, before you would have reached the shoreline 20,000 years ago. And what that means is that all that bottom land under the ocean would have been prime real estate for plants, for animals. There would have been rivers and streams and lakes and people. People who had lives, not unlike us. I mean, they are us. And so what we found off Manasota Key is that 8,000 years ago or so, there existed a small pond, freshwater pond. It might look something like this. We're not sure. This is kind of our best guess. It was near the coast. And over the intervening thousands of years, the Gulf of Mexico has slowly risen and has covered that pond entirely. So now if you stand where once was the pond, all you see is the beautiful Gulf of Mexico. But 21 feet under that water is something that we were totally unexpected. We have found the remains of a large number of Florida's indigenous peoples. These are carefully interred burials, resting in the bottom of what was once a freshwater pond. And through very detailed, delicate, time-consuming, laborious work, we've been able to begin to tell the story of who these people were and why their remains are now under the Gulf of Mexico. We've done a number of radiocarbon dates on some of the material, and we know the site dates from between approximately 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. That's a while ago. And it is. And to put that in perspective, we were brainstorming last night thinking about, well, what are some really well-known archaeological sites that people think of when they think about archaeology? Machu Picchu, right? 700 years old. We go back a little bit further. Birth of Christ, that's a nice known figure, 2,000 years ago. Great Wall of China, 2,700 years ago. We're older than that. Pyramids of Giza, 4,500 years ago. Stonehenge, 5,000 years ago. So think about this. 8,000 years ago, right here in Sarasota, well, actually right there in Sarasota, there were people interring their dead in a pond. Now, I want to note this isn't the oldest archaeological site in Sarasota. We have a number of ones you've probably heard of, Little Salt Springs, War Mineral Springs, very important sites. And it's certainly not the oldest site in the state. That's the Page-Latson site at over 14,000 years old. But what's remarkable about this site is that it is the first archaeological site in North or South America in which we have the preservation of delicate organic material like human skeletal material, like the associated burial material that I'll talk about in just a minute, that exists in an ocean. How did it survive? And that's one of the questions we're trying to answer. What we've done is actually found the edge of what was once this pond. So that image on the right is a sector scan sonar image, and you see that line there? That's like the edge of the pond. So we can find the bank where it was once dry land, and then you move over and you are what was once in the water. Of course, all this is already underwater now because of sea level rise. And again, this is kind of what we think it might have looked like 8,000 years ago. But what is especially noteworthy about this is that Florida's indigenous people used this pond as the final resting place for the remains of their loved ones, of their families, in a way that we might think of it as a cemetery or burial ground. And what we have evidence of is them taking the remains, wrapping the bodies in hand-woven fabrics, floating the bodies out to the pond, sinking the bodies to the bottom of the pond, and then with a series of large sharpened wooden branches or stakes, they would drive those stakes around the body to kind of hold the body in place on the bottom of the pond. And we documented this, resting right below the seafloor. 7,000 to 8,000 year old wood that is clearly constructed, modified by human hands. You can see the tool marks. You can see where they've stuck it in a fire to make it extra hard so it didn't crinkle. It is completely unprecedented and amazing that something that old can be so well preserved and survive literally thousands of years of hurricanes, of sea level rise. It's absolutely remarkable. Now, one question I seem to get a lot is, why would they bury their dead in a pond? Which is a perfectly valid question, to which I, as the anthropologist, like to counter, why do we bury our dead in the ground? We have our cultural norms that prescribe that there's certain ways in which we treat the dead. And we can infer that the population living here in Sarasota and perhaps much of southern Florida 7,000 to 8,000 years ago had a very prescribed method of dealing with the dead. And that involved what we've seen here at Manasota Key Offshore. And if we think about how different it might appear, I argue that it's actually maybe not as different as it might first appear to be. Because, yes, okay, one's in a pond, one's in the ground, but we have headstones, right? What does a headstone do? Marks the location so that friends, families, loved ones know where somebody's resting. It's a visual marker. It represents the remains. And what we think is that these stakes that actually held the bodies down actually protruded above the waterline of the pond and provided a very similar visual marker so that members of the societies could pay their respect, could know where those bodies rested. So this has been a very surprising experience, and it's rare in that we're able to get such a direct connection with the past. It's one thing to maybe find some stone tools, some arrowheads. It's something totally different when we're actually identifying and documenting the actual remains of people who lived so long ago. And what we found is this site is a snapshot of the society. We have adults, we have the elderly, we have males, we have females, we have teens, we have children, and we also have infants as well. And it's been a challenge to figure out, how do we protect this? How do we preserve this? What is the most respectful way to honor those people that are there? And we've been very lucky over the past couple of years to have the help and support of so many individuals and organizations here at Sarasota, at large, Ringling College, Gulf Coast Community Foundation. We've expanded nationally and recently internationally with the National Park Service as well. So many individuals and organizations who've recognized the significance of this site and want to help protect and preserve. And so this is a project that we're going to be looking into and trying to manage for many years to come. It's right in your backyard, and I encourage you guys to think about that. The next time you're in front of the water, whether it's the Atlantic or the Gulf, just take a minute and think about what might be out there. Think about the mysteries, the potential for what's buried under that water. Thank you very much.